Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today, I want to dive into something that definitely changed the way I look at my own health and data and how I can use data to influence my health decisions. And it's also becoming a rather popular tool as well, and that's a continuous glucose monitor, or I will also reference as a CGM. So today I want to talk about getting the most out of your CGM experiment. I think that now that the Dexcom Stelo is available over the counter, that became available to non-diabetics last summer. This episode is being recorded October 2025. So last summer, Dexcom Stelo became available to anyone, not just diabetics. And I think a lot of people are starting to see like, oh, maybe that could be a tool for my weight loss or optimizing my recovery or just my energy levels, or, I think it's being talked about a lot more, and how glucose is something that non-diabetics should care about too, because I once heard, I don't remember who said this, but they said everyone is technically pre-diabetic until we become diabetic. So don't even look at those standard numbers like, oh, when you hit 100 fasting glucose, then you're pre-diabetic. I would look at it like you're always pre-diabetic until you're diabetic, is essentially what the doctor was saying. It was a podcast I was listening to, I believe, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting way to look at it. Like every step or every decision you're making right now is either creating disease or preventing it. So this CGM is kind of like a tool in that. And so I think a lot of people are sort of wondering, like, how does my body respond to foods that I eat, or my stress levels, sleep, or walking, movement, and so if you're someone that's considering getting a CGM, or you've used one and you just want to know, like, I wonder, like, what I could do to get the most out of that. Okay, like, all right, I got it. I put it on my arm. I'm like wearing it, but like, what can I really do to create lasting change out of that 2 weeks or the month that I wore a CGM? So in the episode today, I'm just going to talk about just briefly what the CGM actually is, why it's becoming popular among non-diabetics, touch on that a little bit, my personal experience getting started with them. I started wearing a CGM over 5 years ago, and then also how to make the most out of your own CGM experiment, a little step-by-step guide if I were in your shoes. So with that, let's get started with the episode. Hey there, I'm Katie, and welcome to the GLUCOSEGLOWUP show, where I'm making blood sugar balance for non-diabetics not just important, but actually fun and approachable. I'm a girl mama, problem solver, wellness advocate, and someone who turned a deep dive into metabolic health into real life results, like healing my insulin resistance and unlocking my fertility journey. This podcast is your backstage pass to everything I've learned, and I'm still learning, about glucose, longevity, how to beat your cravings, and stop feeling hangry. Why does this all matter? Because when your blood sugar's in check, everything just feels better, from your mood to your energy and overall health. Here we'll talk about glucose tracking, eating for balance, optimizing your health, fertility, navigating the healthcare system, a holistic approach to wellness, and biohacking your way to feeling amazing for years to come. I'm in the trenches right alongside you, working daily to manage my own glucose and have more energy for the things I love. So whether you're ready to kickstart your health, deepen your understanding of how food impacts your body, or just want a relatable space to learn and grow, you're in the right place. Let's get glowing. All right, really quickly, I want to go through what a CGM is and why everyone's talking about it. I know I've talked about this before, and some of you may already know, but a CGM, or continuous glucose monitor, it's a small device usually worn on the back of your arm. It measures your glucose in real time, round the clock. It's never not tracking. Now, you may have gotten your glucose checked at the doctor at your annual exam, or you have a glucometer and you check that. So those numbers are going to be a little different on the CGM compared to those. So the blood test is going to be the most accurate. The glucometer is going to be different than the lab test, but it might be a little closer to more accurate. The CGM is actually measuring the interstitial fluid between your cells, so it's definitely not the most accurate, but it's best for trends. It's going to show your numbers, but I find that it's sometimes delayed and it can be off by 40 milligrams per deciliter at times, depending on what CGM you're wearing, compared to your real-time glucose. So you'll be able to still see spikes and crashes, or if it's stable or not. You'll be able to see like that curve. If it's flatter or if it's kind of all over the place, more like a roller coaster. But it's not measuring the actual blood glucose levels. It definitely gives you a good visual story of what's happening inside your body, like I said. But again, not like the end-all, be-all number. Traditionally, CGMs were just used by people with diabetes, but in the past few years, more and more non-diabetics have started using them to optimize energy, prevent blood sugar crashes, improve long-term metabolic health. Metabolic health has kind of started to become a buzzword. I think the latest statistic is like 93% of Americans are pre-diabetic, and they, most of them don't even know it. Another stat that I had read was 80% of non-diabetics still spike their glucose into the diabetic range just based on things we're eating. So we're not in the clear just because our annual lab came back as we're in the standard normal range. Our fasting glucose is 99 or less. So we're not necessarily in the clear when you have that. So I think a lot of people are starting to recognize that. Back in, I feel like it was around 2019, Levels Health started, and that was about the time I started hearing about them on their podcast, or on a few different podcasts. I think it was Dr. Hyman's podcast I heard about Levels, and I ended up signing up for it in 2020. But I think like with that, so they used doctors to prescribe CGMs to non-diabetics, so you had to go through a company like Levels if you wanted one as a non-diabetic. Otherwise, your doctor wasn't going to write you a prescription for one. So that's sort of how I got started. I wore the Freestyle Libre, the Dexcom G7, and most recently I did wear the over-the-counter Dexcom Stelo. I have some reviews and thoughts on all of those on previous podcasts. I can link to those if you want to listen to my thoughts like on those CGMs. Specifically, I'm not going to get into that here today. But I started wearing one when my fasting glucose levels were kind of coming back a little wonky. I wasn't consistently out of range, but I was definitely in the upper, end of normal, which in this case is not great. When you're hitting like 90s for fasting glucose consistently, it definitely is kind of sounding the alarm like, hey, I think we should like kind of look at some things here. And these things came up when I was starting to think about, a pregnancy, growing our family. So I was trying to be a little bit more diligent about like knowing what was going on in my body. I was definitely doing the right things, eating healthy, 80% of the time, right? That 80-20 rule. I've always like worked out, but stress has been something, anxiety has been something that's been a part of my story as well. And some of that also contributes to blood sugar issues. So it's not always food, but sometimes it is like experimenting with, maybe there is like a couple things in my diet that are contributing to these spikes and crashes, and then my energy is low, and then I don't want to eat as well, or I'm not working out as well because of that like energy level. So I think like curiosity, and I was using a glucometer, and you can't see trends as easily. I mean, who wants to like poke their finger 100 times in a day so you can like create your little chart? Like nobody wants to do that, and it's really uncomfortable. But I was like trying to do it a little more often, like get my baseline before a meal, get my 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour after eating a meal. Like what are those levels? And then, after a while you can see a little bit, but the CGM definitely helped me find things quicker. I still use a glucometer and occasionally use a CGM, but I do not use one as often. I mean, it is an expense. I won't lie there. I talk a little bit about price also in previous episodes, but it is worth, once, twice a year, maybe every quarter if that's, in your budget. Those are things that I would consider. But let's just say you are ready. You wanna try it for a month, 2 months, maybe even 3 months. Like you wanna really get a baseline of where you're at. Like where do you start? And after wearing a CGM on and off for how many years now? Over 5 years. I've definitely kind of learned a little bit about what I would do if I was getting started for the first time. So let's dive into what that would look like. So you have your CGM, and I would say for the first 1 to 2 weeks, just observe what's going on. Do not change your diet. Don't try and be like, oh, I have to have this perfectly flat glucose line. Don't do that, because I feel like you're doing yourself a disservice by trying to be perfect, because once you take that CGM off, or you're going to be like, well, too bad. Like, I have no accountability. This thing isn't yelling at me anymore because my glucose is spiking. I wouldn't do that. I would just eat normally, eat like you normally do, and see what's going on. Work out like you normally do. Go through those stressful events and keep a journal or a food journal, lifestyle journal, like write it down. Just like track what's going on. Or if you're using like the Levels app, there's other things like Signos is out there, Lingo. There's all these different apps now. The CGMs also come with an app, so you could just utilize that as well. But good old pen and paper is always just fine too. So get your baseline, maybe even compare with your glucometer if you want, just to get those spikes and dips and all of that. Like, just eat normal, like I said, just observe and track. All right, once you've tracked for like 1 week, I would suggest 2 weeks. Let's just like kind of look at the trends in your data and be like, well, what meals were causing the biggest spike? Did stress or lack of sleep perhaps impact my numbers? Did I skip some meals? Was I feeling hangry mid-afternoon? Were there certain breakfasts or dinners that really set me up for success? Or was there a dinner that I had and then I woke up the next morning and my fasting glucose was like 95 or 100? From there, I want you to review that and then reflect, and then like maybe let's pick one new habit to work on for the next week or two to positively impact whatever it is you saw happen. So this is like sort of like choose your own adventure, right? But maybe you need to aim for 25 to 30 grams of protein per meal. Maybe that is the thing that you focus on. Like pick one of these habits. Take a 10 to 15 minute walk after eating. Eat your veggies first, then do the proteins, fats, save the carbs for last. Maybe it's just pairing dessert with dinner instead of eating it later, if that's something you like to enjoy sometimes. Eliminate sweetened drinks. I am just such a big believer in not drinking calories. This like one really irks me. I don't drink soda. It's never really been a huge part of my story either. I would say once in a while growing up, but I really just don't drink my calories, and there's always a lot of sugar and additives, and maybe that's it. That one could be really hard for some people, so maybe that's not the one you start with. Aligning higher carb meals with exercise days. I do sometimes play around with like carb timing. Maybe that's a little bit more advanced, but something to consider if you're kind of there. Maybe it's just getting sunlight exposure in the morning right away, or grounding exercises like walking outside with no shoes on or socks. Maybe it's adding omega-3s like avocado, salmon, or just more nuts. Like, I want you to start small, like pick one of these, right? You'll be surprised how just like one shift, like walking after meals, for instance, can just dramatically change your glucose levels or your energy, and maybe even, create this discipline, right? You're not always motivated, but you could be disciplined if you always took a walk after eating dinner. It just like becomes this habit, but you have to keep doing it. And that's why I think if you kind of focus on one versus like, oh my gosh, like I was spiking all day, I don't know what to do. And then you try and change like 10 things at one time, and then it's like, none of it's going to work because you're so overwhelmed and it's just, no, I just would focus on one and just like slowly start building those habits now that you've like had this awareness. Okay, so I would kind of keep adding habits over time based on like your observations. But what I would want you to do next is simplify with meal rotations. So I talk about meal batching, and I also feel like meal rotations is very effective for me. So you've been wearing the CGM for a while. If you're only going to do a month, it's going to be a consolidated time frame, right? It'd be great if you would do at least 2 months. 3 months would probably be great if you are like just kind of looking to get started. Now, if you're going to do it multiple times a year, maybe you just do a month. But this is like, if you are kind of experimenting and you kind of want to set yourself up for maybe long-term success, I would try and go a little bit longer if you can. If not, like, try and get this in whatever time frame you have available. You've been wearing your CGM, so pick 1 to 2 breakfasts that you know are keeping you stable. Like, try and find that sweet spot. So for me, it's like this protein shake that I have often with protein powder, banana, peanut butter. Sometimes I've been putting my magnesium in there, and also some collagen. Like, find that thing, find your 1 to 2 options, and then rotate them. Like, maybe it's 1 to 2 this week, then the next week you do something different. Maybe you switch up what's in the protein shake. But find those options that you just know are like your go-to breakfast. I also like to do egg scrambles with like spinach, mushrooms, tomatoes, garlic powder, little pepper, and then eggs, obviously. Just do that. Pick them, like something like you're not going to get sick of. I mean, that's where I think like the rotation piece comes in. So like pick those 2. You've experimented, you know those work. Stick with that, because breakfast to me is most important. So let's try and stay off the blood sugar roller coaster. That's why I would start experimenting with meal rotations with breakfast. Now, do that for a little while. Don't try and feel like you got to change all your snacks, all your lunches, all your dinners. Start with breakfast. And then from there, you can retest and adjust things if those aren't working. Are your glucose spikes smaller? Do you feel more stable throughout the day? Has your energy improved? Take some notes, like see what's going on. And then from there, like maybe you can start a meal rotation with your lunches. For me, I talk about this nonstop, but like Cobb salad, love Cobb salad. Maybe it's as simple as cooking air fried chicken for the week, like a big batch. Banza pasta is a good option with a little protein, but don't go crazy there, right? And like some roasted Brussels sprouts, that's a really great, well-balanced meal. Like, give that a try. And just, see how lunches go. I like to, on my meal rotations or meal batches, like make extras so that I have enough for, let's say we made dinner and we made like a double or triple batch, then your lunches or another dinner are covered with those meals you already know are going to keep you stable. So try this like meal rotation idea while you're like kind of testing and adjusting things. And then slowly, like I said, add in some more habits based on what was going on. Is it eating more protein? Is it the walking? Is it getting sunlight exposure? Is it simply like drinking more water instead of grabbing that soda? Start to just see how you're feeling. I did do an episode on like a beginner's guide, like without wearing a CGM, like what I would do with tracking glucose. And one of those things that I talked about was just having an awareness of how you feel after eating. Or maybe it's how you feel after you did that walk, or you drank more water that day or that week. You had really stable breakfast. Like, once you start to kind of experiment and adjust things, you will find your groove. But there is sort of, this experiment phase is building awareness. It's not perfection. And I think a CGM is a tool. I think a glucometer is a tool. I think just writing down how you feel after eating or exercising or waking up in the morning, I think those are tools. and they can be used to make empowered choices. And I would not stress about spiking your glucose. I had so many experiments. I wasn't even experimenting some days. I thought I was eating pretty healthy, and then like you throw in some barbecue sauce or like that one ingredient and you realize, wow, like that is not for me. And then you just learn. So it's not about perfection. And like I said, even in the beginning, like it is going to be so tempting to be like, I need this curve as flat as it can be. Well, that is not realistic. You're setting yourself up for failure, and I don't want that. So write things down, experiment, don't go for perfection. Over time, you will start to understand your body, and naturally, maybe that idea of a perfect, glucose curve might come true, but again, there is no perfect, even non-diabetics spike. Again, things come up. My life right now has been chaos, and I have not been eating that well, and I have to deal with the fact that honestly, I have to go out to eat once in a while because of what's going on. We've been gone, and it's just like you make good choices, but sometimes your glucose is going to go up, and that's supernatural, right? You eat, your glucose goes up. The thing that you don't want is you don't want continuous large spikes, right? Because that's going to make you hangry. It's going to just lower your energy levels. So it is important to start to understand your metabolic health, but not go for perfection, okay? So that's it for today's episode. I hope this started to give you a clearer picture on how to get the most out of your CGM experiment, whether you're just starting out or maybe you're just diving back in with fresh eyes. Just remember, it's not about perfection or tracking every little detail forever, but it's about learning your body and just using that insight to create habits that truly support your energy, mood, and longevity and just overall metabolic health. When you start connecting the dots between how you eat, move, sleep, and just overall feel, you will start to see how powerful small daily choices are. I think that's kind of where the magic starts to happen. And I kind of geek out over this because I have really enjoyed learning more about this and kind of doing a deep dive in it and sharing it with you. And so if this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend who's curious about CGMs or really just wants to learn more about metabolic health. I think even without a CGM, you could do this with a glucometer. I mean, that's a more affordable way, long-term solution. But share it with someone you think might need to hear this, and tag me on Instagram at GlucoseGlowUp if you start your own tracking journey. I would just love to see your wins or your aha moments and just your progress towards metabolic health.